So Brandon just says, well, I'm not in charge because we're talking about topics. What topics we're going to talk about today? Because I didn't prepare because I woke up like 23 minutes ago. So I said it's a good thing to learn because the heroic responsibility, commons producing personality, what you want to do is you want to demonstrate your competency or whatever. And that means you get to own stuff that you and then other people like to get you to own stuff so they don't have to.
Be careful what you tell people that you're good at.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know if Luke does this, but I tell people I don't know anything about computers until they catch me in the lie.
Most people are surprised to learn I spent as much time as I did in the computer industry. So.
Very interesting how there's still there's still something about needing to know both physics and engineering. Like you can't know just engineering. You can't know just physics. But if you look at what people say, if they know physics and engineering, you can probably trust what they're saying. Because they understand what's going on at the next level down. It can influence the present level up, right? And then we have this thing, it's like, well, it's not enough to know law. You need to know economics and you need to know cognitive science for the same reason.
You probably need to know a discipline at each scale.
Yes, exactly. Which is what we suggest you teach, right? Is you teach it as if they're grammars, right? So you have the list of grammars and you say, these are the things you need to learn in the world. And we're going to teach you these basic grammars of scale, and then these grammars within scale, like accounting within, So, and if you teach it like that, then the world makes a whole lot of sense to people because the grammars are just the scale. We don't need to teach lying, though. We don't need to teach that. We need to teach how to identify lying, but anyway. So, any good news this week that you found fascinating or interesting? As the momentum apparently starts to build?
A momentum toward what?
Well, I don't want to say you were right again.
Don't have to do that.
Because God forbid.
Plus you're recording. So
but it is sort of heading our direction. Everything's sort of heading our direction. And I'm just kind of surprised.
It can't not do that.
Say that again.
It can't deviate from the current path, and demonstrably it's this way.
In other words, what's happening is deterministic.
Well, yeah, you conform to reality or you don't. And if you double down on non-conformation to reality, you're not going to make it.
So the consequences of non-conformity that started out as the class, then sex, race, search for power, right? Is showing up in collapse, right? It's showing up in dysfunctions. And you can feel them because there's no longer a sufficient surplus of uncorrupt, unparasitic wealth, right? It's distributed enough for people to fight over in a democratic polity.
The enemy doesn't exactly need things to go their way to get stronger. In fact, they rely on things not going their way because everything got solved, they wouldn't be needed anymore.
Correct. So, so I was very skeptical that in other words, I have a I have the weird, I do make the common error, which I said my common errors are, I am extremely skeptical of the capability of the majority. And meanwhile, it's too optimistic when it comes to individuals, right? I mean, it's just. So if I look at that common thing, I'm like, well, Brandon was right, but how did you know, Brandon, that this would happen? I mean, is it just because you're in tune with what's going on out there? The conversation.
I mean, I only follow people who have a perspective that encapsulate a complete picture of reality. You can look at it like bubbles inside of other bubbles, inside of other bubbles, inside of other bubbles.
Right.
The left isn't good at pressure. So all the little bubbles are being inflated until there's a little bit of pressure, then they stop. And it's all happening inside of every one. So the bubble that's holding all the little ones bursts first, right? So we're blowing out everything at scale because each of us is foregoing the duty that we have to this place a little bit at a time.
Okay, so responsibility, duty, and so we're all maximizing our escape of responsibility and duty. Is that what you're? Right.
Yes, I mean, essentially, and we're set. We have a system set up to do that. Meaning, it's because everyone cheats a little bit on their taxes that we don't collect enough taxes, not because there's giant tax cheats.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, that's the same with lying. It's not because there are liars. It's because everyone lies a little bit, and it gives cover to the people who are lying in big ways. Because we all want the ability to skirt accountability if we make an error, right? In testimony, if we lie,
right?
You can lie out of ignorance, error, or bias before you're lying maliciously, before you have intent to do harm.
So signal to noise, what happens is the signal to noise ratio keeps getting out of line.
Yes.
Until the presumption that cooperation will continue at prior rates is no longer consuming an opportunity, but consuming the opportunity, the capital, the organizational capital of the polity, right?
Yes. Proximity and technology has afforded us to just not become compatible or cooperative with one another.
Right.
Oh, you're being too difficult. I'll get this somewhere else.
Right. So
the money exacerbates that because you can collect it asymmetrically and apply it where you are, you have shortfalls where you're not able.
So at some point, your pursuit of individualism, that's the wrong word, of individual self-satisfaction is sufficient that it isn't producing innovation that benefits the commons. It's producing consumption that consumes the common capital, right?
I can squeeze it all in there. We keep working to lower prices instead of cost.
Right. Yes.
You want the price to reflect the value. Price, it's an irrelevant, it should be a precise measure. It's the value, and it's not more and it's not less. It's that much. And it changes with time because the environment puts pressure on how we value things.
Right.
Yeah, we're doing the same thing with behavior too, right?
Correct. Oh yeah, this is iterative and across all the scales.
So it goes back to incrementalism. The problem with tolerance and forbearance versus forbearance. Is that the right compound? Yeah, tolerance for you have to do. You correct me here, Luke, when I get this wrong. The problem with tolerance for forbearance is that without a hard measure, which is what we try to provide with the natural law, you don't know the deviation. You only know that there's change, right? So you only see change from state to state, which is the boiling the frog problem, instead of the absolute temperature or the absolute change that's in deviation. I mean. So that's really the underlying sort of behavioral math, right?
Mhm.
As I say
Yeah,
that,
for the entire distinction of between active and passive, that's the math of it. So
I consider active like ownership.
Yep.
Ownership of your actions, it's etc.
yeah, you're fully accounting for the costs.
or ownership, what's the difference in ownership and responsibility? The ownership is your own and responsibilities to others, or you could say it's responsibility to self, but that's contradictory. That's, that's a word game. Ownership versus responsibility.
I mean, they're interchangeable terms unless we're disambiguating like them as capital markets.
It's interesting I'm sorry, we noticed the pattern is just funny. It's just one of those ironic things. It's one of the frustrating parts when you're a kid and you're trying to learn, because I remember my mother trying to teach me accounting, is that I don't understand how something can be positive and negative, but then over here it can be negative and positive. Right, it's debits and credits problem. So I used to have to write that up at the top, right? What the criteria, how you do each thing. And it's a similar thing here, is that we can talk in the positiva or the negativa, right? And we can talk about the self, or we can talk about the collective. The same basic problem is you can look at the question from both directions. But the difference is when we do that, because we fully account, we know the difference, and we don't know if, I mean, certainly the common people don't, and we don't know if the audience does either. Though the quality of our people, man, the quality of our people is just amazing.
Well, they following or participating requires that you see the distance between you and others. We illuminate the scale of
Yes.
right, of preference, of ability. You can participate here. We afford people to see the deviation from the norm, to see the exceptions where they lie.
Mm-hmm.
I look at our guys and we have a lot of work to do. They're meaning everyone has to raise everybody else up. We have a lot of work to do.
Yeah, of course, but they, me sitting alone 12 years ago, thinking this is never gonna fucking work. To where we are today, whereas we have guys that can do. I mean, it's amazing to me. Who's this guy Walter? Well, I don't know what his full name is. Sorry, I can't remember his name right here. I don't know what happened, but it's like in the past 9 months. I mean, the stuff the guy's saying today is pretty rock solid. I mean, Jacob is rock solid. I mean, it's hard to get to where you're Martin, right? And you can like fucking address everything, right? But each of us is slightly different specializations. Even what I have to ask Luke about the tolerance forbearance thing all the time, right? So we all have our domains, but it's just amazing to me, and that's just a few of them. I mean, even the people who follow us and say, well, it was a guy yesterday, I remember his name, Adam. He said, well, I don't want to be too closely associated with the Institute to protect you guys, because I lose my patience too often. I can't maintain Institute decorum.
He's been around a while.
Yes, exactly. And then Levi's Goffin went off his own thing, but damn, I mean, now that he's got long form, it's the same thing with him, right? His long form stuff is really quite good. So, we've got a couple of others. They're Dan. No, I don't want to go through them all, but we have all bunch. Steve Pender goes off on any of these guys. It's just interesting. Some of these guys have been with us for a shorter time and they get really, really good, or they've been with us for a longer time and they're good. But it's just like, it's like with these videos, I was used to not be sure if it really did any good, but it clearly does. So it's just fascinating. Just fascinating, the quality of our guys.
I imagine it becoming overwhelming swiftly. First you learn how to detect what's false, so then you shut up and don't say anything false until you can say things that are not false.
Right, so it takes some
There are a
time.
lot of people coming.
Yeah. There's a lot of people who don't say much because they know something's wrong, but they're not yet ready to produce, right? That's probably normal.
Which isn't actually required in our community. We're okay with correcting error.
Yeah,
We recognize the difference between error and lying.
yes.
So I encourage people to speak up and be wrong. I remember when a lot of us were getting started with this material, we were getting our faces kicked in on a regular basis and learning quickly from it. That's because we were engaging with error.
Yeah, well,
So
I think the important thing, I mean, I know what I do, which is if you get at least something right, I'm gonna like it.
Right.
Right, I mean, just try, right? And, and then you can just suggest that, think about this, or that's close or something, right? Or good job. We're pretty supportive, but it is pretty, you should try, if you can. I think the hard part you notice with people is that some of us are predisposed. I've been researching this the past week. Predisposed to disconnection, which is we can get our emotions out of it, and some of us are not. And for the more predisposed you are to disconnection, which is keeping your emotions out of it, the easier it is to do the work. And so it's part of what I think people have to learn is disconnection. So in other words, it's a lot easier to do what we do, which is keep your emotions out of it. if you can, you keep your emotions out of the logic. If you can just state an equation. So like we're trying to say, you can't testify to that, or that testimony requires this lie, right? We're trying to say that. We're not, it's a lot. So, but we don't necessarily have to take it to, you shouldn't say that because, or you're a bad person because, or it's just write the fucking equation.
we're pursuing correct conclusions, not conforming conclusions.
Right.
That means being wrong often.
Yes. I don't know. I take it. I mean, at least for me, if you learn from being wrong, right? I mean,
If there's any feedback that can correct you, yes.
yeah. If you get feedback that corrects you, that's like, wow, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Now I'm going to be better. And it's like the problem with most people is they just want to be right. They don't want to be better. God damn it! I gotta turn this off. What the hell's doing that? So it's just impressive, and I begin to. My hope that we can produce a curriculum that's for the material. I mean, we've made it so much easier to understand over the past 2 years that my belief that we can make a curriculum that's understandable is increased dramatically. And I suspect that once we do that, the ability to, which I know you guys have all kind of commented on, is that our ability to produce the curriculum at different grade levels is made possible. Right.
The only real chore is teaching the adults.
Right. Because it's really, because that way you're fighting resistance, whereas with kids you're not, right?
Mhm. I mean, I like our approach because we could actually start with the kids, and the improvement in the kids would change the adult's mind about how you educate. Because the difference is marked. It's not like this
What a
is,
small difference, right?
it's a magnitude of difference everywhere, across every discipline. It's a magnitude of difference.
No, you were the first one to, Brad, you were the first one to say that there was a big, we noticed a big IQ difference from the training people in the sciences. In other words, by the adoption of general rules. Right, that's a misunderstanding. There's a big increase in demonstrated intelligence. It's technically G, sure, IQ. It should, which is IQ is trying to measure. Technically, that's just a measure of neural performance, right? I mean, it's like measuring the friction, the resistance of cables, right? But when we get in, you used to say, well, demonstrated intelligence that people are getting from science, right? That was like 15 points.
It better afforded them to conform to the rules of reality.
Right.
This is another tool that affords for a greater precision with conforming to those rules. The greatest precision we can offer at human scale.
It's like it decreases even more resistance because that's less nonsense you have to consider.
So the difference we've normally found is that there was no resistance to math, right? There was a little resistance to science, but there's quite a bit of resistance to behavioral science, right? What we do. And but that's a resistance that's built into adults, right? It's not built into children.
The former afford you to manipulate this place, and the latter requires you to manipulate yourself, to discipline yourself.
Right. So yes.
So the former give you discounts, right? Now we're accounting for the costs.
Right. Oh, that's really good. I didn't frame it that way before. That's really smart. So that's an increase in precision.
Yes.
Right, so it's an increase in precision. So in the arc from embodiment to to socialization to anthropomorphization, which is our natural system of measurement across all the evolution of knowledge of the maths and the sciences, we tend to break it into for useful purposes. We start with in other words, for the purpose of communicating it to the audience, we start with embodiment, socialization, anthropomorphization, right? So we start with anthropomorphization as being the natural human system of measurement, which is why, of course, myths are the most readily accessible. Myths with archetypes are the most, which is a change in state of an archetype, which is a personality trait, right? Is the most accessible means of human education. And then we go to narratives and histories, right? And then in parallel, we can go with measurements. So we can do counting and then arithmetic and then mathematics. But if we follow this through, we sort of deal with religion, philosophy, empiricism, science, operationalism, computation, right? I mean, that's the arc of knowledge that gets you from internally dependent cognition to externally dependent cognition, right? That arc. And Nate takes us to we still have the behavioral capacity of reason, but we are no longer biased by anthropomorphism. But it's quite alienating sometimes to think in computation, right? In other words, operationally, it isn't very emotionally fulfilling. It takes a lot of training to get there. Right. So what's happening is as you go from mythology to theology and to philosophy to empiricism, the minute you start to go from philosophy to philosophy, you're adding burden, and when you get to empiricism, now you're adding quite a bit of
We compensate for all of that with heroism, excellence, and beauty. So we compensate with being pulled apart from those things.
Okay, so I want to, if I've made my arc, then that's the point that I'd like you to drive on that. So how do heroism, excellence, and beauty compensate for that problem?
It affords us to measure how separate we are from nature without separating from nature.
And by separating from nature, what do you mean?
I mean transcendence, as we mean it.
In other words, well, okay, so I'm trying to operationalize that as what is the change in our method of cognition that makes that transcendence happen?
You can tell when you deviate from nature and the outcomes are better than what nature would have produced.
Right. So we're trying to, the more knowledge we have of nature's processes and procedures, the more utility or power we have or opportunity we have for taking advantage of the procedures of nature, right? And the more we don't, the less opportunity we have. But then the worst side, the more we deny and act against it, the more costs we incur.
The demonstration that this is going to work is in the application of all the other sciences.
Again, you're very good at
physics in application has produced that magnitude of difference in ability to act. If you conform behaviorally the way we're saying, it will have at least as a profound effects as physics did.
Right.
I imagine more, of course, but
I imagine it's more, like I said, this is my underlying question is it, how hard is it for people to switch, right? Because it seems like we're asking a lot of training people into it when they're young is different from teaching it to people when they're older, right? And so, oh shit, I lost how you phrased it just a moment ago. But I lost where you said it. Damn it. You remember how you phrased it a second ago? You're worse at this than I am. So
I see what we're doing as giving people the ability to not focus on the past, because that's killing us. I don't remember typically what my train of thought is just, what is he saying? How do I complete the frame? Once it's complete, then I don't work to remember it.
Right. So let's go to the past thing, but the past is empirical in some sense, right? But it may not, but whatever your past idiosyncratic experience may not be generalizable, right? In other words, we don't know what the probabilities were that caused your past experience to produce the event you remember. I mean, memory is very good at this, right? I mean, if the people who remember everything, it's very hard not to go nuts. Seriously, because there are people who remember diary. I can't remember the kind of diary memory, right? But they remember literally everything of every day in sequence, and that's actually really hard on you to do that. When what you're looking for, what we evolved to do is do the opposite, which is identify general principles which are computationally efficient in the seizure of new opportunities. Look, I feel like
harder to teach adults because we spoiled them. These adults are spoiled.
Well, they also lose their neuroplasticity too. I mean, after
all that.
Luke, you might. I keep thinking you want to say something, and I'm not sure.
Oh no, it's fine. What we're doing is we're trying to capture the positive consequences of nature's pressures and limit or minimize the negative consequences of nature's pressure, right? We want the adaptation without the death.
Right. But getting people to follow that arc is somewhat difficult. And the difference is, so what, I mean, I always just say is, how could we think before language? It's pretty hard, actually. You forget that language is a means of computation. It's just the most language, because it is part of, language is evolved from embodiment and socialization, right? Language is largely considered those two, along with anthropomorphization. That is the most intuitive language we have. But what can you not think about without language? Well, it turns out it's pretty hard to think without language. Well, so we got writing and as for memory, right? Well, it's pretty hard to learn about the world with any degree of consistency without writing. We could do it by storytelling, but then we got writing. And then you can only remember so many things by storytelling, right? Whereas in writing more. Then the same thing would happen with counting, right? Counting in arithmetic and mathematics, which is, holy shit, look what we can think about and remember now.
It's all compression.
Well,
They're all means of compression.
right. They're all right. Compression is a really good way of framing it. We can take and make comparisons of increasingly abstract sets, right? To judge greater, less than value, whatever, etc. And we can also judge futures. In other words, we can judge futures as if they're differences in weights and measures and things. And then we can do some other measurements. Well, I mean, so what does science do? It gives us the rules by which underlie all those things, right? The general rules, it gives us the rules by it. And what do manners, ethics, morals, norms, traditions, values, institutions do? They provide weights and measures for social cooperation. Not just not just like it at the low level where we're talking about embodiment and socialization. We're actually, what we're saying is, because I have emotions, I'm predicting your emotions, right? We're all the way up into predicting group outcomes, right, or whole futures. And then we get into, and then it's the same thing with mathematics. All of a sudden we get to mathematics to the point where it's not obvious right now, but we're basically at the limits of mathematics. I mean, most everything we've done is mathematically limited because it requires computation to go beyond, because what's mathematically reducible is a fairly small set, it turns out, compared to what's computationally reducible. Because the amount of states you have, it's like, we know this in economics, but we don't teach it this way. But so what's happening is, once we've got the rules of the formal, logical, physical, behavioral, and evolutionary laws of the universe. I mean, what is it we don't understand? It's like we're not, we sort of like got the universal system of measurement. Right, so we can know what's true and false. Then everything is application. At the same time, if we have those rules, just like we can launder the truth out of the universe, we can launder deception out of man, which is what we've sort of set ourselves doing. Because via negativa, it turns out that we don't necessarily know what to do, but we sure as hell know what not to do. So can we teach that, is my underlying. In other words, that's the arc of the story we're on this morning, right? Is that our people are getting amazing. As Luke said, you don't have to, don't worry about making errors, worry about trying. Because every time you try, you give one of us the opportunity to educate you a bit.
To increase your precision.
Right. So, but for those people who for those people who don't know about the work yet, how hard is it going to be for them to get there? How hard is it gonna be for people to understand this? Is it just social proof? Or do they need social proof and some education?
It'll be particular. People who understand other intellectuals' work, for instance, can act as a bridge to our, like if you understand Thomas Sowell, like through his frames, you can get to all of ours.
Yes.
So we can just pick on those people and their audiences.
Right. The soul's pretty much there. Right? It's gonna be very.
Well, he also has the right. He went from Marxist to where he is as well. And he went from the left to the right to and through to economics.
Because economics gives you a way of measuring the world, behavior in the world. And I think it's more important to say that reiterate that what we're doing is we're saying, we're in error elimination by increases in precision. Right. So we still believe that we can teach this that it's over time. This can do over time what empiricism and science did over time. What Darwin has done over time.
I would say that people are underestimating our potentials. That's what they don't understand.
Well, we can forgive them, but I mean, we're sitting here talking about how, it's a pretty big leap in human consciousness. I mean, the grammars alone, if you get that, all of a sudden the world gets to make a little bit.
It's the leap to human consciousness.
Right. Yes. Yeah, what the way it looks like to me, the way I see it in my head as we work through all this stuff is we're reconnecting nature to all domains, and anything that can't be reconnected is a lie.
Yes.
So it actually becomes easier to understand everything as we reconnect everything back to nature, back to the rules of nature. That's what natural law is. It's just the assertion that the constraints that nature puts on everything. So all we're doing is identifying those.
Right, those are that's limit-based reasoning, right? And so what you're saying is, but then on top of it, once we know those rules, we know how to make use of nature.
Yeah.
And we're part of nature, right? So we know how to make use of ourselves.
That's the grand arc. I've been articulating for a while is that, before we had the capacity of thinking in the way we think now, every choice was life or death, and in the period of time between your action and the consequence was very small, right? And as we've as the ability to predict emerged and things like that, we started to be able to increase that period of time between the decision point and the consequence, right? And that's exactly our pursuit of science and technology and that stuff. It's just been increasing that period. It's been allowing us to, as we can predict, we can start to make choices about which outcome we prefer and things like that. We're increasing the time period between action and consequence. What the effect of that is that we start separating ourselves from the effects of the consequences, right? So we either the entropic effects or the adaptation effects, right? We started separating from both of them, and all we're doing is reintroducing all the adaptation effects. We're reconnecting the lines that produce the adaptations.
Yes.
And all across all domains, right? So we're saying you can't actually escape nature, even though that's been the theme in so much of progress has been an attempt, or at least presented as an attempt at the escape from nature. And we're saying anything that actually claims that is a lie. Everything that can be connected back to nature is actually progress.
Right.
It allows us to acquire those adaptations while we're still separating ourselves from the negative consequences, right? And that's the integration that I'm talking about. So.
And the left is basically saying that actions don't have consequences.
Right. Yeah. Right.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. You notice one thing. I think Musk is a great populist for this case, but in general, it's like when the more energy you use, the more it depletes its source. Right? It's like the joke is the great illustration of it. It's actually true. Every time we launch a rocket into space, it slows the Earth down a little bit.
We
Right, I
launched a
mean-
rocket into space today.
What? I think it
Tried to
blew up.
launch a rocket into space today.
Didn't it blow up?
Yes, it did.
I just saw that in the news. What happened? Do you know?
They blew it up. It was a test launch, right? And so
It was a test launch. They
some of the
blowing up was
engines-
part and parcel of
Yeah.
perhaps what could happen. Yes.
some of the engines got destroyed in the process of launch, and so it started spinning, right? And so that it didn't create, didn't create any damage outside of what they could control. They just destroyed it. So
Well, this is
they-
part of their thing then.
again, deal with error, introduce error, and deal with it. I mean, that's how we move forward.
I mean, it's the first time they tried this thing, fucking monster.
We can fix the trajectory of Earth by firing the rocket in the opposite direction every other time.
Yes, sorry, I had to jump back in context, yes. So it wasn't that there was like some set of satellites on this. Some research satellites on this thing. This is a test of this new platform.
Yes.
So, and one of the things I love about this guy is like, well, we learn. And that's why he's able to evolve so quickly is
He rightly sees that as a successful launch.
it's a successful launch, right? What do we learn? And so what happens is you drive people back to Brandon's statement is heroism, excellence, and beauty, right? Right. And so that's, and I didn't follow that arc enough. So if I could bring that back to that arc, what do heroism, excellence, and beauty compensate for? Because what I see them doing is their means by which the individual obtains status by directing the expression of dominance to the production of commons.
That's
Right,
exactly what they're all doing.
right,
Those are all the forms of doing that,
right.
right? Those are the 3 points of the triangle.
And so the net result is status or innovation. Right, is heroism,
And heroism, excellence, and beauty.
beauty.
That's right.
So
Good, true, and beautiful also map to that, the same.
yes, good, true, beautiful. Is that so? Which one of us is good, true, and beautiful? I think I'm going to vote Luke is beautiful. You knew I was going to do something. I couldn't let that one go.
What's the third one?
Huh?
Well, there's 4 of us, and that's 3 traits.
Oh, we can all have some one of those virtues. More, we can all have.
Someone has to be the balance point right in the middle.
All right, so is there anywhere else to go with how important heroism, excellence, and beauty, or
Well, you can't understate their
what
importance.
is it? Truth, the true, the good, the beautiful, right? That's what's the same thing, right?
Same thing.
So, is there any? Because that's the opposite of sticking your head up, right? The Japanese prohibition on sticking your head. Is it Japanese or Chinese? Don't stick your head up. I think it's Chinese.
All the Asians are kind of against sticking your head up. They did a lot of cutting people's heads off over there to defend.
Yeah, that's true. So our thing is stick your head up for the commons, but not for the self. Right? I mean, even though in Greek, the old Greece bragging was see, they don't understand it. Like bragging is shit talking. Right? It's the same thing as we call shit talking, right? Right. And it's just nonsense. So the problem is when they talk about the Greeks bragging, they don't get it, right? Because they're weak. They don't understand strong. So when the Greeks talk about bragging, it's this heroic stuff, right? Well, these are in terms. The hard part is, these chains. Western logic isn't good versus evil. In other words, it's trivial. Good versus evil is like this trivial binary moron level way of argument, right? But for most European stuff, you have to think about it in chains, right? So is the true, the good, the beautiful is good because it's a contribution. It's the direction of dominance expression of the commons and away from the self, right? Which produces a good for all instead of friction. So we don't have this good versus evil thing. Even our original religion, which is more order versus chaos, right? It's order versus order by what versus chaos by what. This tendency there's a human tendency to want to think in one-dimensional logic, whereas Western civilization is trifunctional. And in my view, we've been somewhat infected by the Abrahamic religion of good versus, reductio ad absurdum, to the tests of good versus good and bad, good versus evil, instead of chains of reasoning. It's sort of like the dumber version of thinking, which appeals to some people. But then what we do, of course, is we explain everything trifunctionally, or ternary logic. And so that makes it it's amazing how different you think if you think in via negativa and ternary logic and trifunctionalism than if you think in just good versus evil, because you end up with there's a spectrum here of trade-offs that have to be made in order to make something happen. So in the sense of what's hard for people to learn, I think that it once you teach people ternary logic, it's a lot easier, right? Especially stupid thing like what's better, what's more true or false, a true statement or a false one. Well, a false statement is more true than a true one, right? Because there's always opportunity for you to err in a true statement, but that once a false statement, there's no opportunity for error. So we have undecidable, potentially true, and false is the hierarchy of truth. And so I don't know, if you combine all the little bits and pieces we teach as other than binary reasoning all the way up to this ternaryism, and we ask people to think in arcs and sequences or serializations by disambiguation. It's not like an instinct that's good. It's grug not like, right? I mean, we're asking people to learn quite a bit more, but there doesn't seem to be any difficulty for people to do those things if you teach them those things. It certainly wasn't for the Greeks.
You just got to constrain them, that's all. I mean, the left shows the ability for it. They have a spectra of genders. That is thinking in a spectra. I've watched them logic their way through the connection of all those genders before. It's internally consistent.
Of course.
Just not externally correspondent.
Yeah, what's the value in it though? Is it nonconformity or is it attention seeking?
Yeah, status in nonconformity. Right? We have a victimhood status hierarchy. They're climbing it.
Right.
I mean, it's the equivalent of knowing all the Talmudic arguments. You just show how proficient you are in knowing that stuff, even though it's completely useless.
Right.
Which in turn selects for verbal IQ and cognitive femininity.
We're affording people to know what not to think about. An open mind is only good to shut on things.
I mean, okay, so let's compare that to Warren said to Christianity. So Christianity says you can be virtuous by doing no wrong.
Always think about how to help others.
Right. That's pretty good,
That's pretty good.
right? Now all of a sudden now you say it's good to be a victim. And we diss on Christianity because it says life is suffering. Well, I disagree with that, but I mean, it gives you an excuse, right? Right? It gives you an excuse for your status. It gives you heroes. So what's different about all this status seeking by victimhood? It's just a further enhancement of that. It's greater precision on top of it.
Well, if the moral good is helping others, then I am a hero by being a victim, allowing you to help me.
Yeah, I see it as an inversion as well. That's an inversion, or turning it inside out.
I mean,
Jesus.
it doesn't have to be connected to any actual victimhood at this point.
Right.
Connected to any actual what?
Victimhood.
Okay. Okay, so you can choose your victimhood.
From an approved place.
If you're some of the right identities, you can.
As long as they're maximally deviant for your ability.
I mean, if you're a white man, at least you still have the option to become true, and then you can claim that.
Become what?
True, trans, slang.
There's an out for everybody.
Okay, so is there any value if is this a problem of democracy, or is it a problem even without democracy? In other words, prostitution and drug use are bad things, right? They're bad thing. They're means of sedation of one kind or another, economic failure or economic uselessness, or in the case of drugs, just disconnection, right? Religious fervor is often a way of out of status pressures. So is there, in other words, other than the fact that you're baiting additional generations of children into hazard, right? What is the negative consequence of saying, yeah, natural selection hasn't been good to me? Because that's what they're saying, right? They're trying to normalize that natural selection has left them at a disadvantage that they have to pay a higher cost of conformity to.
It's harder than the artificial selection that we afford them, right, to express a status.
I mean, it's more like they exist because natural selection has been too kind.
Ouch. That's like the third painful thing you said in a row, Martin. I mean, did you like sharpen your wit before you on a grindstone before you show up this morning?
Yeah, that's my specialty.
If your existence is only possible because of our separation from nature's feedback, then anything that risks re-exposing you to nature's feedback is lethal to you. I mean, it's a lethal threat to you.
So what do these people get by do they get membership? They trade, instead of conforming and paying an internal cost of conforming, they don't pay the internal cost of conforming. They pay the cost of disconforming. But because we've narrowed time and space with the internet age, these people can find a group to belong to, and they can advocate for their group, right?
Well, they are actually conforming. They're just conforming in a way that's very easy and allows them all their vices.
Right. Okay, so, but what,
To be fair to everyone, it's not easy on the other end. And these people are saturated in information. They have no society norms or traditions and no meaning. What do we
I
expect?
know,
them
but
all-
I mean, if you're feeling really outcast and you find another group of outcasts that agree with you, and it's creating a tension, which is providing you with what you feel as legitimacy, it's a rational behavior, right?
Oh, of course.
Right.
Yes.
So what I'm asking is there really any cost to this goofy behavior? Other than baiting our children into a hazard?
Well, there's a cost of all the things they could be doing for society that they are not doing.
Yeah, there is for surely an opportunity cost. And then there's all the everything they're asking for from the arenas of economics or medicine or social interaction are all degrading the affordances that allowed them to emerge in the first place.
That's the question I'm trying to ask. Is that true?
If we were to disafford them the ability to use the group as a special interest group and so they can't reorient entire markets for their favor, then I don't see a problem with it. But right now they can abuse the status as a special interest group and harm others, and they will be backed up by legislation and the law.
Okay, so you mean if you're asking for tolerance, that's different from if you're asking for attention.
They're asking for investment.
It's investment.
That we conform to them, that we afford them space. That's a forbearance, an investment in their behavior.
Right, but again, I'm trying to find what's our cost. In other words, I have I'm concerned. I'm a conservative libertarian, so I have a huge disgust response, right? But as long as a gay guy doesn't hit on me, I don't care. I don't want to see this PDA, public displays of affection. It makes me nauseous, right? It evokes my disgust response. But it's not like you're choosing to be a hippie, right? It's like, okay, if it's biological, it's biological, and if it's traumatic, it's traumatic. And I'm not trying to say somebody's needs to be.
Where's the justification for signaling it?
No, that's what I'm asking.
There is none. There's no justification for signaling it. Why should we know? How should we know?
Right. So what I'm trying to say is, are they trying to get attention?
If I know you have already taken my attention to something that it shouldn't be attending to, how would I know that you were gay, Curt?
You wouldn't. Right?
And I shouldn't
have told you.
And I shouldn't, right? Unless you
proposition
me.
I have pretty good gaydar, but I mean,
all right.
Pretty
but that is mine. That is.
But I don't care, right? I mean, it doesn't. I kind of find that charming, right? I just don't want to. I don't want any public sexuality to be in my face, right? I mean, if I'm trying to play the voice of the public in the sense that I'm trying to raise my children to not bias their energy towards sexual gratification, right? Which is what we're essentially trying to do in mass. That's the underlying function. My primary concern about this is it drives attention towards sexuality, and then that's baiting into hazard for future generations. When children are increasingly expensive in the modern era. So to me, I understand it as I don't want my kids around that, right? So I don't want it in the commons, because what's commons in society? It's not a place for you to party. It's a commons in society, is a place for children to be raised, right? That's the whole point of it, which is the discomforting part they find, because individuals think it's for them, not the people who are raising children. They've got the priority reversed. So And so we're trying to minimize the hazards the children are exposed to. So they have the greatest chance of being contributing members to intergenerational common and members of the intergenerational commons. So if they weren't out in public about it, why would we care?
How would we know?
Well, I think, you know, I think the cost that accumulates is a cost of norms, right? The deviations undermine norms, right? And norms emerge as a mechanism to optimize our adaptation to an environment, environmental pressure.
But that's a general. I mean, but that's great. But that's a generalization of the specific, which is that, yeah, but that's because those norms are those norms that are limits on sexual expression are those to protect our children from risk, right? Of directing their energy to sexual gratification rather than production of private and common. And that's the reason for the ancient prohibition against all these sex acts, whatever, is because these people became dead weight. I mean, we've gotten to the point where people, you know, it's pretty easy to stay alive, right? But it's pretty expensive to raise children. And so in the past, it was like, well, I can't raise this kid and hope he's going to support me if he, you know, speaking the male, ends up the sodomites toy. Because nobody's going to want him as a husband. And he's not going to be able to provide for me in old age, right? So we think that we're insulated now by the fact that we have redistribution mechanisms, but we're not. If those redistribution mechanisms are as influential on the group as they are the deviancy of our own children for the family, it's just people. It's like why I brought up the rocket leaving the Earth, you know, technically slows it down, is that just because you can't see the consequence of an individual deviation from the resource pool doesn't mean that there isn't a cost, that minor cost doesn't accumulate as more people do. So I agree with you, Luke, that it's about norms, but with the norms exist for a purpose, and some of those norms exist for just cooperation without killing each other. But others of those norms exist because most of society exists for ensuring that we can raise children at the minimum exposure to risk of failure, right? I mean, when they're fucking expensive. I mean, look how many kids you got, Luke? Forgot already.
4.
It costs money, right? It was expensive.
Yeah, if I want to live by modern standards, sure. It costs resources no matter what we do. But the point I'm getting at is we've separated competitive fitness from reproductive fitness. They are the same thing. We want to pretend like they're not. So anything that's not reproductively fit is not competitively fit from a biological standpoint.
Yeah, I'm agreeing. But there is fitness that's internal, failure of fitness that's internalized. There's failure of fitness that's externalized. Right? If their failure of fitness because of birth or whatever, or developmental harm or chemical intrusion, I mean, we don't know. What seems to be an increase in the failure of sexual dimorphism, which we don't seem to know the answer yet. It's probably more social developmental than it is chemical or biological, but I don't know.
Right.
And
I'm not talking about homosexuality even. I'm saying that what the function that norms serve is they optimize the external factor of competitive fitness, reproductive fitness, no matter your internal factor of reproductive fitness.
Okay. Now that's sorry. I was trying to solve for the other problem first, but that's a great question. So, what you're saying is that, well, I mean, if I internalize the costs myself, in other words, I want to live a flamboyant, gay lifestyle, man or woman, and I keep that out of the commons. In other words, you can have your clubs and whatever, but it's just not, it's not something that's discussed. I mean, then that's a cost you pay and your parents pay and the resources of society pay, but that's just natural selection. But what you're saying is, flipping it around, can you just reframe your?
Well, what I'm getting at is that the costs of deviancy ought to be paid by the deviant until such time as that behavior is no longer a deviation from norms.
Right. So again,
what we're saying now is the deviant demanding everyone else pay the costs of their
right,
deviance.
Right. Why should I pay the cost of your deviance, which is your developmental failure? Well, my answer is, if you have this cost, there's a difference between tolerance, acceptance, and inclusion. Right? In other words, treating as you're an equal. And I'm like, well, I think it should be tolerated. I think it should be accepted. I don't think it should be promoted. Or
When what we're seeing though is the claim that my deviancy cannot survive without you paying the cost of it. And that's a true statement, and that's what should be the case.
Okay, so now we've got it. And so how am I paying the cost of it? How are you paying the cost? In other words, if person A is deviating and person B is paying the cost, how is person B paying the cost?
Right.
No, I'm asking you to illustrate that.
Well, that's what I was getting at with norms, is if your deviancy is undermining the norms, then you're actually imposing a cost on my ability to maximize adaptation within this environment, to maximize my reproductive fitness within this environment. Right. And that of my kids and my grandkids. I mean, you're imposing a cost on the entire commons.
So what you're saying is there's special pleading.
Right.
And I know there's a victim that is asked for the redirection of resources and attention to their dysfunction, which is harmful to the norms. Okay, that's the right answer. Okay. Well, and I'm going to say those norms exist specifically to facilitate human cooperation towards the production of intergenerational ends, which gets back to truth, excellence, and beauty. Okay. Well, that was
that it's interesting because if you listen, I don't know, I just saw that video of the guy threatening to shoot people if you don't let him in the bathroom. Right? There's a video going around on Twitter right now where it's
what?
Trans guy. He's like, every trans person should learn how to use a gun, and if somebody doesn't let you in the bathroom, basically, take them out. Is the crux of the assertion this guy's making. These guys think of themselves as the hero. They think of themselves as the beautiful. They think of themselves as the true.
Wow.
They even say it.
They're responding to those same signals, but they're doing it in a complete inversion. They think they are the hero in that story.
They're the ones that need the norms the most.
Yeah.
I'm a libertarian, right? Which means
we all have our faults.
Oh,
wait.
After all this time, and still.
No. It's just my instinct is libertarian, right? We call that libertarian. I don't say I'm like a political libertarian. My instinct is libertarian, which is okay. The problem is that I need the right of disassociation, right? In order to do that. And the right of disassociation should apply to any space that I'm in, and people should be able to disassociate. So the right of disassociation means if you're going to adopt that lifestyle, then I'm going to disassociate from you, right? That's the right of disassociation. Well, if I have the right of disassociation, then of course, if we did, then you wouldn't be, every business would have no trans or, right, no trans allowed, and it would have biologically male, biologically female bathrooms, right? I mean, everyone would do that because no one would take a child anywhere else, right? Because so I mean, that's what we need is the right. So in other words, I'm not telling these people die, right? Go die or what. To me, if you want to do something that's stupid, as long as it's not in the commons and I can disassociate from you, that's fine. Like I don't. If I go to a business and and I did this recently as a trans person there, I just don't want to do business there. It gives me the creeps. It makes me uncomfortable in the space. And I would want my children to feel it was uncomfortable in the space too. I wouldn't want it to think it was cool because I wouldn't want to bait them into hazard of getting attention by self-degradation. Anyway, so I'm like, as long as we can have disassociation, and that means I'm not going to hire you if you're trans, right? I'm not going to hire if you are liberal. I think that's the problem. Am I missing this issue? In other words, they're depriving us of the means of
To discriminate.
to discriminate.
Yeah, they say it out loud.
What?
Everything they do is anti-discrimination and so on.
All right, so
That means we can't judge.
right.
Well, no.
So
They view us as a risk to them, but really it's nature that's a risk to them. And they're demanding that we pay the cost of intervening in that risk that nature imposes upon them.
there's another path here.
Because in the construct that we just created, right, the disassociation in their view, from my observation anyways, is that is a lie. Denying their existence is lying because they think they really exist.
And you got to be there.
They are
socially constructed reality.
Right. They're the hero opposing your lying when they say you can't disassociate from them. They're the hero in that situation.
All right, so
Being a hero is risky.
what does this do to this? We've talked about this children. What does this then do to this the status, dominance, and competence hierarchy? Status, competence, and status, competence, status, value, competence, and dominance hierarchy.
I'd like people to look at what it's done to those things.
Explain.
I mean, look at your value, competence, and what was the other one that you said? Just look at those
value.
hierarchies as they exist currently
Right.
in shambles and disarray.
Status, value, competence, and dominance. That's the hierarchy.
All right, there you go. All of them are trashed demonstrably.
So explain why.
The inclusion of the unfit. For the sake of their unfitness.
So in essence, you're inserting a friction by adding false information.
Yes. So that they can say that they exist among us and that they are true. Luke is saying they require us. Their reality is socially constructed. If they didn't have you to sit there and say that their existence isn't true, we wouldn't be there to them. Right? Heroes like the fight. They like to go out and adventure. We're affording people these adventures that are costly for civilization.
Yeah. The homosexual thing doesn't really bother me because once it's biological, I can't really argue with it. But I can argue with is risk expansion, because people do go through the developmental cycle where they're developmentally fragile, right? And they can be, and this is what they're doing. They're grooming people to be developmentally fragile, so they can have more of their numbers. The trans thing is lying, and that's what I think that's what bothers me about it. It sets me to participate in a lie or a fraud, and I can't be compelled to participate in a fraud. The same thing is for
You do banking, don't you?
well,
You do banking, don't you?
yeah.
I'm just playing with you. Being compelled into a fraud.
Dick. Oh God, you really had to go there. Sorry. Sorry, I had to go refill my coffee. So we've established that there are harms. I'm still trying to explore the status value competence dominance hierarchy. And
What does that hierarchy? What does that hierarchy produce?
that produces the set of incentives to produce leadership where people who we seek to imitate and follow, where we continue the tradition of using heroism, truth, and beauty to direct the dominance of the expression of dominance to the production of commons, which produce capital by innovation.
So I would describe that, or I would state that as it produces favorable or preferable or superior adaptations.
Right. So, and I agree. And so so it's like whenever you drive for this, I was going to write something about this yesterday. Is that whenever you drive for decidability, now what's the criteria for making a decision one way or the other? You have to take it all the way to the end, right? In other words, you have to find the limit. Limits are what provide decidability. So you're going to the limit of decidability over time for everyone, for mankind. Now, I'm taking it to the limit of what provides decidability for the persistence of the means of getting there. Does that make sense? Right. And so the problem is that that the other end of that scale is me acting entirely selfishly. Right. And the optimum end of the point of the scale is evolutionary computation, right? And velocity, and in the middle of there somewhere is the returns on adherence that maximize evolutionary the returns on evolutionary computation in the present moment. Right, that's the midpoint. I can't tell if you're following me or not.
Yeah.
Okay. Usually I can tell because you got that Curt, what you're saying is fucking obvious face on. So there's that midpoint. And what I'm trying to do is state that midpoint because it's tangible to the audience rather than going all the way. So the only difference is I'm trying to put it in economic terms because it's still within the range of human experience. So how, fuck, I lost the topic. What were we talking about? The
Hierarchies.
The hierarchy. So my understanding is since status is the primary measure we operate by, other than survival, status is because it produces status is a means of creating a system of measurement for the self within one's range of competency that sets a standard of weight measures for one's behavior. In other words, it's a system of decision making so you can get there. So in other words, it's the imitation of philosophy. In other words, where philosophy is reasonable, imitation is intuitionistic. right? Does that make sense? Intuition is imitation. Either I didn't have any alcohol either. It's just natural. So I can, I'm an anthropomorphic, I can imitate something. Status is something I can imitate. It's something we all do, right? And we find something that's, oh, I want to be like that. I'm going to imitate that. That creates a standard weight measure that we can adopt by anthropomorphic means. In other words, intuition. Philosophy would be the reason, we'd say we the verbal rational expression of whatever imitation is, and it would be, instead of a new character, it'd be in a set of ideas, rules, or principles, right? And empiricism would be the end, or science would be the end result of, which is what Luke said, is that if I did everything perfectly, this is how it would end up. So there's this spectrum of capabilities of people. Well, people pursue status. So because it's the thing that's most available to the majority of the pyramid, right? The whole base of the pyramid can access imitation through anthropomorphism and status seeking. So if that's the case, then anything that interferes the status hierarchy, right, is driving more and more people away from conformity with nature, right, the natural laws of nature, which increases the friction. It's why those of us who are anti Abrahamic religions is because these things impose a cost that tells you that to be ignorant, in a sense. They mandate ignorance, in a sense. And so once a religion mandates an ignorance, it's creating a friction. Well, isn't the same thing true of a false status system?
Yes.
Right. So it has a negative consequence on the status system. Well, their argument is going to be, well, there are a lot of us, right? Well, no, there are enough of you.
They'd
But
be quick to point out the overpopulation problem, though, as well. So,
as we've recently learned, we have an underpopulation problem, and the world has an overpopulation problem. It has nothing to do with us. It has everything to do with India and Africa. Oh, interesting data yesterday of how even in Africa it shifted down from like 8 children to 5 already.
Mhm.
Literally can't keep, it's like the rate of change on the planet Earth right now, and like trying to, like I say, you can keep up with everything. Yeah, you can. But that's like you can keep if you get competent in enough of the, like Brandon was saying, and in that hierarchy of knowledge, right? We call the grammars, but it's really the hierarchy of knowledge systems. You can keep up, really, because most of it's nonsense, right? I mean, what is it? You care that we figure out graphene, but what you really care about is we figure out a battery, the energy density of gasoline, right? It's only interesting in that we try to get to the battery, the energy density of gasoline. That's the only thing that's interesting, right? So you can keep up with the trajectories that are interesting. You know, every time somebody comes out with a new poly bond of some goddamn chemical, I mean, what the fuck difference does that make? I mean, we just don't care. I mean, it's not like it's valueless. It's just, you know, okay, great. It's not, what's the end result we're getting out of driving towards? So if you know what these anchor points are, those things are very easy to track. On the other hand, the rate of which things are changing right now in domains we've previously not had access to is a little freaky. And some of them are forward looking, which is, I don't know, I'm kind of fond of the AI revolutions going on right now because it's clown world to the power of 10. And then some of the stuff it's working on with genetic therapy is looking pretty interesting. But I mean, the crap that's going on in the negative world, which is the decline of the post-war order, which is leading to the restoration of imperial conflict. That's pretty scary. And the decline of Western civilization internally due to the feminist Marxist woke sequence is just holy shit. That's pretty awful. So, and the decline in our population because of progressivism is pretty awful. So it's a pretty if Luke had to drink a coffee, you know what we must have he's getting ready for something. Anyway, so there's a lot going on out there to keep track of. We've sort of developed the pattern. I'm sorry. This is decaf. I'm not talking faster and more this morning because I'm drinking coffee. This is actually just decaf. Called sleep. So the problem I see with the AI thing is just that we've already figured out the limit of the current tech. Just in what, November? Just November? November, December, January, February, March, April, six months to find the limit. And people are already working on the next one, and you can always see how it's not already going to fail. So we'll see. Whereas when it first started, it was like, wow. But look at the rate that came out, that change happened. I've never seen anything like it. I was trying to prime any conversation there that I could get out of you guys, and I didn't see any facial reactions that were, oh, that gives me this idea. Okay, I'll switch topics now because we really did a good job on that arc.
Change isn't hard when you have a foundation from which you can integrate change into. So, and all this deviation from reality, from nature, it just undermines that foundation that allows us to integrate change into our existence.
So when I'm trying to get a clip out of this. Or so when you say nature, I usually say the laws of nature, right? Right. And I iterate the 4 categories. Right. And so I don't think, do you think the audience understands when you're saying that's what you're saying? Or do you think that they think in other words, that word has a lot of baggage.
Right.
Right. So what do you mean when you say nature?
The pressures that filter existence.
Yeah, laws of the universe. Okay.
You want to put him in a real tizzy, just tell him that it's God.
Right.
Oh,
that too.
well, you it's funny when you get down to Jefferson and those guys, and they know the answer. They just don't want. They just say it's God, so they don't get canceled. Blackstone does the same thing.
Well, it's easier for people to frame it in that anthropomorphic sense, right?
Right, and it's a loyalty demonstration to use it.
Mhm.
That's why I like the Jeffersonian frames, the laws.
As long as your God is the God that wrote those laws, and that's what you mean.
Yeah, it's by
Sure, right?
the laws of nature, man, nature, and nature's God. Right? I mean, if those things are the same, then it doesn't matter whether we discovered them, nature evolved them, or God determined them.
I've been accused of naturalistic fallacy for appealing to laws of nature.
Have you really?
Yeah.
Do people actually, Martin? Because you're like direct, but you're fairly gracious. Do people realize how competent you are when they're talking to you? They probably don't.
I mean, some people that agree with me, none that disagree with me.
One of the reasons I write proofs is to solve that problem.
People that disagree with you will not see them as proofs. They will just see your words a lot.
Yeah. Martin, you know, what are we gonna do, man?
I've been accused of word salad using less than 10 words. So
Often from people whose diet could actually use a bit more salad.
Well, that was funny, Martin. That was good. I got word salad a bunch this week. I went on to Governor Greg Abbott's post. So I guess Florida outlawed everything to do with identity politics and race, right? The governor,
recently they struck all the education from the schools.
right?
If they didn't get rid of civil rights law, then not everything.
Yeah. But the schools are without the ability to teach those lessons without an escalation path that's legal and lawful.
And so Abbott in Texas looks like he's gonna do the same thing. So that's all that really needs to happen.
They're doing the opposite here in Minnesota. So
Oh, they'll do the opposite here in Massachusetts as well.
Well, I expect it from Massachusetts, but Minnesota, one thing I learned about living in Washington is wherever the Scandinavians went, they took their optimism with them. And the problem is that it's one of those things is not realizing that your optimism is something that you made possible by your culture.
They're realizing they're getting a hard dose of that right now.
Yeah, it's
Over in Scandinavia.
yeah. So I'd expect, you know, I just find it's weird that it's happening there, but I mean, I guess. Very interesting. We used to make fun, you know, we made fun of the Scandinavians in Seattle because most of those were loggers, right? It came over as logging industry, but it was largely Scandinavian, founded by Scandinavians. And we had that beautiful Scandinavian subculture for so long. It was wonderful until Microsoft. Microsoft came by and lit that all on fire. Anyway, so where was I going with that? So I was on Governor Abbott's thread there, and I just could not believe the terminal dumbitude, right? Because it's a popular thread. But it turns out that's actually how you have to increase your numbers because they keep your posts share, you know, presentation in your network. So you have to bridge networks and get replies. So what that really means is you have to start something. And so I don't know if I have the energy to, I mean, I'm Martin, you guys are gaining people every day, right? I mean, Martin, how do you gain people every day?
Well, yeah, it's people already on the right, obviously.
I'm still gaining 25 a day. Martin, you get Brandon, you get people every day. I mean, look at
More of the days when we get popular retweets.
yeah. And Noah's fucking rocking so far. But in order
He's a
to
pioneer of the starting shit
yeah,
category.
Yeah, no, he's the only one more popular than you.
yeah. Well, he's conveying a down homey message, right? I mean, there's going to be a bigger audience than anyway. So we have to go off from those. We have to go start stuff, and that'll be how we'll gain more members. I'm just like 10. If I reach 10,000, that's fine with me. What's that?
well, most people don't seem to understand when we're starting stuff. Like they don't recognize that a blow has been landed.
But you know, I even tell people, you know, I'm just arguing with you because people are going to see it, right? So people are largely foils. Well, this one woman, this is common. You can find, like, there's these rational women out there. You can find them. But they just can't tolerate it. They can understand something's true, but they won't accept it because they don't want to, they dislike it. I found a couple of those doing that. I just think that's fascinating. This is no matter what you do, the idea that you can't follow your feelings, it's just intolerable.
If we set the proper limits, they could follow their feelings like they want.
Right. All right, so that's Abbott. So we've seen legislation passed in Idaho, some legislation passed in. So some of this stuff is moving. So I mean, that's evidence that there's motion, right?
Yeah.
What about again, I gotta ask this every week. What are the, it seems like on the surveys, Trump comes out, but it's very hard to believe that he would win again. What's your opinion on this?
They use the same voting machines and they will double down on cheating. Although they did close up some of the mail-in ballot ordinances and across some of the states, there's not anybody more popular politically, but politics isn't popular.
Right.
So I don't see anybody that Trump can lose to without cheating. A significant amount of it, like there was the last time we had a presidential election.
Well, they're going to intentionally suppress his presentation on media. I said that already.
Of course.
Some of the things they're doing here in preparation for fortifying elections, right? So they just passed a law here that gives all illegal aliens a government ID. Illegal aliens, right? Undocumented people, whatever. They all get a government ID now, and then they're doing pre-registration of voters as young as 16. So you're automatically entered onto the rolls in anticipation of your ability to vote in 2 years. That's not going to be abused. None of that's going to be abused in election cycles. So these are things they're actually passing into law already. They've made it law now so that everybody has the option to do the mail-in voting and all that. And so I mean they're just sending out ballots to anyone they can think of.
They tried that illegal alien thing here in Massachusetts last voting round, and they will try it again. We voted it down, but they'll try it again.
They got it in here, so
Which is
they're
why
already fortifying.
we need to screen laws like that before they're afforded a vote.
Yes.
It's impossibly important.
So I don't see any Republican winning. So I'd rather have somebody in there that makes the press heads explode than anybody else. So
You can vote at 16 in Boston too.
Yeah.
I mean,
National elections at 16?
Well,
Yeah. Just look.
they passed for local elections at 16. If we're extending childhood, we shouldn't be pushing voting down.
That's a cool.
The problem is there can't be any distinction. So
if the right loses all hope in elections, that is a good thing.
That might be true, Martin. So there's that.
I
Some people lost
think
hope in 2020.
that would be true if the right wasn't stuck in restraint, but they're stuck in self-restraint stronger than they are losing faith in elections. So,
Well, yeah, I meant it in the hope that would loosen the restraint somewhat.
right.
All right, so I did the Trump thing, we did the woke thing. We did the trans thing. We discussed the space, we discussed the launch failure, which was fine. Just trying to go over the topic list. Did you know BuzzFeed shut down?
Did you say BuzzFeed?
Yeah,
Yes.
It shut down?
my understanding.
When? And citing what reasons?
I'm looking.
I mean, are they financially insolvent? Did someone set one of their buildings on fire? Like,
We're gonna move /15% of the let's see, workforce. Layoffs are occurring across nearly every division. We determined that the company can no longer continue to fund BuzzFeed News as a standalone organization. Already indicated some staffers might be able to find roles at Huffington Post. Moving forward, have a single news brand of Huffington Post, which is profitable with a loyal direct page audience. That means they're gone. Yep. So, one more woke hits the dust. Anything on the Fox News settlement?
they did the damage though, meaning like that's a suicide bomber, right?
Yes.
BuzzFeed.
Yeah.
It lived its purpose for their. It's not like this is a sign that they're losing momentum. It's that the power is moving from that realm to a different one.
I see. So they fulfilled their mission.
I recall recently that there have been some completely AI generated articles published and nobody could tell because it's the same stuff they were writing.
Yes.
Yeah, no, I was reading that Fox settled out of court though for like 750 million with Dominion.
Right, but do you have any insight on that? I haven't
Well,
looked at it all.
I think they did it because one of the stipulations, if they went through with the suit, was that the Fox staff, the on-screen staff, would have to publicly declare that they lied about the election results.
Oh, they're
And
not-
that's what they were trying to avoid, was making that public.
They made-
which is absurd.
They made the wrong calculation. Right, that's risk aversion. They
Right.
should have went head on against them. They
Yes.
might have lost, but they should have escalated.
Yes.
Say that again.
They should have escalated. They settled out of court, so they didn't have to admit that they lied. But if they had won in court, it would be that they didn't lie. That would have been the judgment. Oh, you didn't lie. You don't have to say anything. So
Right.
you're caught in the same conundrum, and now all the liars get to go, oh well, you paid out, so
They're just
you're
protecting
on the wrong side.
They're just protecting their staff.
Yeah.
You know, do I
think-
take a money hit and save our staff?
We can't afford to protect lower order capital at the expense of higher order capital any longer. We
Right.
can't do it.
I think the Alex Jones thing kind of
Scared people.
set that bar for organizations.
Yep.
Is, I avoid anything to do with Alec, It's not my world. Pop stuff is my world, but so. What was the crime he was accused of?
Hurting people's feelings.
Yes, yeah. The whole Sandy Hook shooting thing, he was saying that it was, a false flag and that it was all actors and stuff like that. And
Yeah, I mean, he was saying about parents that they were in on it, so it was actual slander.
Okay. Okay, thank you. That's good. Let's see, I'm trying to figure out how that gets through a court, but that would get through a court. Okay, the January 6th thing, it turns out that there was a lot of staging going on there, right? I mean, am I wrong, or is that like the consensus here?
Well, common knowledge and demonstrated by video.
Yeah.
A lot of us were saying that from the beginning, though.
Say that again?
A lot of us were saying that from the beginning.
Of course, I'm optimistic, and I'm the sucker in the room, and like, oh, that couldn't possibly be. You guys end up making me very wrong. Well, so, all right. Well, I'm trying to see if there's anything else that's in the that's hot in the news this week, and I'm not seeing anything other that we need to sort of talk about to cover in the meeting here. And we already did a really good session on the trans issue, so I think we're done. Any other issues? Any other issues you want to talk about before we get off? No. Thank you guys. Love you. Great meeting. Today is Thursday, episode of April 20th. It's please like, subscribe, bell, and leave comments. Bye.